Om Satyena Labhistapasa Hyesa Atma Samyagyanena Brahmacharyena Nityam Antaha Sharirehi Jyotirmayo Hi Shubhraha Yam Pashanti Yatayaha Kshinadoshaha Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. The Atman, the indivisible, all-pervasive self in all beings, in all things, is realized by moderation, by knowledge, by austerities, and by veracity, all constantly cultivated. When mental impurities dissolve due to this practice, then the seer beholds it everywhere, existing in everything, even here in this very life, mind, and body. Om peace, peace, peace. May that Brahman protect us, may it sustain us, and may it illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the teachings or with the world. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. So here, after more than a month of Sundays, we're at the end of, possibly at the end of, a long series of classes that we have taken up on the subject of qualification. So the word could have different definitions, but the way we've been accenting the word qualification is preparation, basically. That in the West, we're really not prepared for the spiritual teachings that come to us from India, from China, from Tibet. Those are both Hindu Vedantic teachings and Buddhist teachings, because Buddha was a Hindu. He was born in India, lived in India. So both of these darshanas, if you could call them that, paths of clear seeing, are very specific to the area in which they originated. Beings like Vedavyas, father of Vedanta, beings like Patanjali, the father of yoga. Most people, you hear yoga here, for instance, as an example of non-qualification, and you think physical exercises, but when they hear yoga there in the East, they think Patanjali, of course, the father of yoga, with his 8-limb system. Or the founder of Buddhism, although I don't think it was necessarily his intention to start an ism. Lord Buddha was the rebel child of India, you might say. I've heard that one of the Swamis give a talk on that. Buddha, the rebel child of India, because he drifted away from the orthodox and started to put his mind on the real practical problems of India about 500 years before Jesus. Buddha lived 500 years, 550 years before Jesus. So he saw people suffering, even in India, where they had been taught lessons about suffering all along. So they were beginning to find out, as our own Holy Mother has told us here at the Ishtam of our ashram here in SRV associations, that the suffering of this world has gotten into the very marrow of my bones. And people try all manner of ways to get away from the reality of suffering. That is the relative reality, if you want to put it that way. seeking pleasure is one of them. And so that could be the way the West is trying to deal with suffering. It's Swami Vivekananda called it sweeping, the dust under the carpet after you've done the cleaning, or covering the carcass with roses, he said. But to face suffering is considered one of the practical and noble practices of these Indian darshanas: Sankhya, Yoga, Vedanta, Tantra, Vishishta, Kundalini, which we'll talk about today. These are all systems that we've talked about over the last 5 weeks of Sundays in this class that's designed to further prepare us for hearing truths that are sobering. In the Gita, which people like very much from India, Krishna says that you should be careful, Arjuna. He's talking to his disciple. You should be careful, Arjuna, for that which is sweet in the beginning, because that will turn sour later. By the same measure, you should not run away from what seems seems like suffering or seems sour in the beginning, because that turns sweet later. So facing off with suffering has been one of the great instructions of all these great beings: Patanjali, Vedavyas, Vishishta, Krishna, Swami Vivekananda, Sri Ramakrishna, all along the way. But still we seem to sort of shirk back from the necessary practices we need to do in order to make ourselves strong so that we can forbear suffering. Forbearance is the default zone of the wise. It's a default zone because they know that it's very unlikely that anyone's ever going to see God here in matter. When they do see it, they've transcended matter and they're within themselves, and then they see the face of the Lord. Face of the Lord here means a great being like those I just mentioned. You have a darshan with them. Interesting. You follow a darshana to get darshan. You see, follow a path in order to have communion with these great souls, and that happens within you. Nobody ever gets samadhi or ecstasy if they're not elated with elevation. If they're attached to things, samadhi's not going to come to them, what Buddha called nirvana. That's why you don't see people having it anymore, so much to the extent that they don't believe in it. So when a great soul like Sri Ramakrishna comes to us in 1838, was it, to 1888, was his lifetime, a brief 50 years. And he has samadhi all the time. And even the Hindu people were looking at him and going, who's this crazy man? See. And they would go by his temple, Kali temple, you see, in a boat along the river there. The Hooghly is actually, it's a branch of the Ganges, of course, but going along the Hooghly River. And then they'd look at the temple there on the side banks there and say, oh, a crazy Paramahamsa lives there. And sometimes parents would tell the children, don't go there, he'll sting you. So Sri Ramakrishna heard that once, said, no, I don't sting, I just prepare people to renounce the world, because nobody can take it with you. And even Jesus said that. And Christianity wasn't listening, evidently. The Christianity that came after him wasn't listening very deeply. So this is what I mean about qualification. It's my usual preamble to a class before I jump into the topic, which nowadays we're just doing for an hour, as I was telling to those people who have arrived here today, instead of 3 hours when we used to do it before, with a break in between. But today we're drawing more from the Yoga Kundalini Upanishad, because we're Vedantists basically, and Vedanta means Upanishad. Upanishads are the anta of the Vedas. That is, the Vedas came, they were in 4 periods basically, very ancient. And by the time the 4th part of the Vedas came upon, they were composing Upanishads. See, God spoke to them. Later on, they wrote it down. That was a God blog I put out last week on the website. The title was God Spoke to Them. It shows this picture of a woman reading this book that's just emanating wisdom out of it, like the Kabbalah, or like the Quran, or like the Gita, or like an Upanishad. And she's just taking this in, see. So God spoke to them. And then later on, they wrote it down. So they believed that the direct transmission of guru to disciple or teacher to student was of great import. You had to be in the same room. You had to be close in proximity. I mean, see, we were cold, and you struck up a fire on the internet. You see, struck up an internet fire. You see, an image of fire going on, and you couldn't get warm from that. You see, so that's sort of like listening to these teachings from a distance. But if you come right into the presence of a person who has realized them, it's the same with the teachings, Jnanam. It's also the same with mantra. If you get a mantra straight from a person who's used it for their whole lifetime, maybe many lifetimes, then the transmission of that mantra really means something to you. Not only in your memory, when you think back on it, like I can think back on Swami Vivekananda giving me the mantra, peace and blessings be upon him, and what a special time that was of my life in my 20s when I got the great Maha Mantra from him, mantra of Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother. And so that was in his presence, right there at the shrine, in his ashram, and I heard his words. Later on, he would tell us about Holy Mother because he actually saw her and got initiation from her. And he would go quiet, and this monk, who was usually not emotional at all, you'd see some tears start forming in his eyes, and his voice would crack a little. And we asked him to talk about Holy Mother, and he'd become silent. And then finally he'd say, what can I say? I've seen her face, I've heard her voice. Now I long for her grace with all my heart. So she had a great effect, profound effect on him when he was my age, getting initiation in his 20s. And he went straight to her, and she sat him down, this young man, Hindu man, gave him the mantra. Sri Ramakrishna was passed by then, you see. So this is what I'm talking about. It's a preparation on all levels of your being when you get something this precious. And of course, the greatest fool would be the person who just turns away from it and doesn't do anything about it. That is, you can hear the truth, but then you fail to realize it. It'd be like somebody in a far distant country where there are no livestock, like say Tibet, in the heights, hearing about milk, but they never tasted it, you see. That's what most people are like when they hear about the Atman, which I just chanted, or hear about Brahman, or call it Allah, or call it nameless Yahweh. I mean, those 4 letters are all consonants. There's no vowels there. So the intention is, in Judaism, you can't pronounce the name of God. It doesn't work. You have to infer it from some symbol. Well, this is what I'm talking about. The symbol here is he spoke to them, and they wrote it down later. So they had to ruminate on it a long time, this voice they heard in their head. And it's not an audible voice, or the voice of a male or a female, or a voice of a human being. It's straight from the source. It's called the Word in so many different traditions. In Buddhism, 550 years later, Jesus was talking to John about the Word. 1,000 years before that, Krishna was talking to Arjuna. Maybe more thousands of years before that, Krishna was talking to Arjuna about this Jnana Chakshu, which I'll maybe show you today, this third eye, that when it opens, you hear the sound of what you can't hear with the physical ears. You see what you can't see with the physical eyes. Light, sound. Out here, they're even subtle. See? Like, they just say, why don't you all make me laugh right now? Try and look at your own eye. Now I'm seeing a bunch of silly faces, you see. So that I can't see itself. That's sort of the idea here, Zen koan style, is that this eye, this third eye, is internal. It's the jnana chakshu. Chakshu means to see, jnana means wisdom. So you're seeing the original wisdom. And where is it that you're seeing it? Inside of yourself. Kingdom of heaven is within you. So that means that you're going to have to turn off all outer perception and sit a while. Buddha did it for some 49 days under the bo tree. That was the longest sit we ever heard about in the history of spirituality in this world, until he finally saw through Mara, what we call Maya now, and had the vision of that being who spoke to him, and he didn't write it down. He became silent. They wrote it down. Some 500 of his students wrote it down later, a few centuries later. It's called the Dhammapada. Oh, listen, he was such a quiet person. And he was so indrawn. He was in samadhi half the time. The world's going to forget the things he told us if we don't write them down now. So 500 arhats, they're called back then. Arhats were souls that had renounced the world. You couldn't have family in early Buddhism. You couldn't be married, couldn't have children, couldn't have relations with the world, money, job. That's what an arhat was. And Buddhism almost died because there's very few people who wanted to take on being an arhat. So you say, well, I have to give up everything else in order for that. So these arhats got together long after he passed and said, we should put everything we remember down. And so you can see that now. It's the earliest scripture of Buddhism. And I think it gets to go by, unfortunately, in Buddhism of today. Now let's go jumping to the top and study the Parapragyamita Sutra, you see. No, you should study the Dhammapada, which were Buddhist's own words. And then maybe wait for the non-duals till you're qualified or prepared for it, because you can read it and it can just go right over your head, as it has done for so many of us. So that's one of the things I'll talk about today. In a short amount of time, we've made our way to the Kundalini part of this chart. Now, we started out with this chart, so I'm going to flash two charts at you as a review. Basically, this one was when I put Swami Vivekananda in the middle, sitting on this beautiful ornate chair, probably in a museum somewhere in the West, and they snapped this picture of him. He was in his half Western, half Eastern outfit that he figured out, with the Nehru collar, you see, in orange or white underneath him, and then this kind of frock that he put on. It was kind of a combination of Hindu dress, Hindu kirta, and English suit. So he had got himself prepared to present the wisdom of India to people who were basically Christian oriented. Even if, because a lot of the people he spoke to of the day had kind of began to part company with Christianity. They weren't believing a lot of the false teachings that were coming out of Christianity. They didn't believe, for instance, they were sinners. They didn't believe that there was an eternal hell that you could be sent to where you'd burn forever, or any of that. That was all superstition to them. So he came along and he said that, and it's probably not there, but it's on another chart. He says where the people of the West have become hungry for the wisdom of India because they're tired of the superimpositions and the superstitions of the fundamentalist Christian religion, dualism basically. But actually worse than dualism, because dualism in India is actually very rich. You're allowed to have a relationship between yourself and the image. First, it's an image on an altar, but it actually represents what's in you. So they go like this with this mudra. If they see an altar, what's there is here. And what's here is also there, has become that, you see. So this is a deer mudra. It's a mudra. It's a sacred position you put your hands in, like this, like fish, you know. There are different mudras you do when you worship in front of these images, which represent divine reality. Everything there in the shrine room is an image of divinity. And we looked at that last week, when we looked at Tantra. We read all the bullet points of Tantra down here. And that brings us really close to a tantric path. It's probably influenced more by Tantra than it is by Vedas or Vedanta. And basically the difference was Vedanta is very cerebral. It's very wisdom oriented. If you can just get the wisdom, that'll destroy the ignorance right away, you're free. That's it in a nutshell. With this knowledge in hand, your ignorance will die right away. Right away might mean one lifetime, depending on the intensity that you realize this wisdom. But on the tantric side, there are so many people following that, they go more by the devotion. And in Tantra, whereas in Vedanta, you say, that's not Brahman, that's not Brahman, that's not Brahman. And in Tantra, you're saying, that's a manifestation of Brahman, that's an expression of Brahman. That's an outer form of Brahman. See? So they're taking what's outside and they're deifying it. Whereas Vedanta is taking what's outside and renouncing it. If you can do the renunciation, it's quicker. But the deification process is very rich, because then you get to see everything here is Brahman. It's like having your cake and eating it too. So that's why a lot of people went running towards Tantra. Oh, they didn't know they were doing that when I was raised in America in the 50s, 60s. When I saw these opportunistic pseudo teachers, spurious teachers coming over to take advantage of people back then. What I'm about to talk with you right now, Kundalini Yoga, they just pulled the wool right over their eyes in the West and started giving them things that would make money for them or would make them famous. But we're not the root and core of Kundalini at all. Kundalini is the divine mother of the universe. And she needs to be awakened, as they say, or I like to say, we need to awaken to her. And that's where when you talk to somebody about chakras or spiritual centers, or you might want to look it up on that web that you were looking at the fire on earlier, and you look up chakras and there's all sorts of strange ideas about it, like they're in the spine. You know, I mean, I get some real good laughs out of this dumbness that's come from these teachers that they've tried to pull the wool over people's eyes. Like the chakras are in this physical spine, but what happened to the main teaching of India that you're not the body? So all of a sudden you're not the body, but the chakras can actually be in your physical spine. That just doesn't make sense, you see. And so it's a knee slapper. Run it by the good old boys back in Kentucky. They'd be laughing and slapping their knees too. It just doesn't make sense. So there's a lot of false superimpositions like that have been pulled over the eyes of people. So that's why this third eye, which we'll talk about, and hopefully, when it opens, then all of that is seen as superstition. That wool gets burnt right away. See, basically, who can keep a cotton cloth? Who can keep a blazing fire tied in a cotton cloth? Is that possible? So when the real thing shows up inside of you, inside of me, inside of awakened humanity, then that cotton that's been pulled over the eyes goes away in an instant, and you see the truth, and the truth, as Jesus said, sets you free. And that's the whole meaning, the whole intention of Vedanta is to set you free. So we started off with Vedanta first, Samkhya, Yoga, and Vedanta. That's what is here on these 7 choices I made of dozens of paths in India that you could go to. I mean, there's some that are listed here that necessarily wouldn't probably be as beneficial to people of today's times, because they're so esoteric. Nobody talks about them anymore. Like Vaisheshika, it's a great path, but nobody has heard of it, nobody knows about it. Samkhya almost is forgotten already. Samkhya, what's that? Samkhya yoga, that's like the foundation of India. If you say that word in India and say the founder, Lord Kapila, everyone goes like this, even though they've forgotten what he taught by now. Oh, Kapila, yeah, we revere him here in India. It's like saying Krishna or Ram there. So we looked at all of these, and the one I want to point out right now is this one we're going to look at over the next minutes. Kundalini yoga, and its various qualifying teachings, let's put them. I'll go through them quick because we want to look at them with commentary more. First is, and this is where we got caught off guard in the 50s and 60s and kind of blindsided, because most people who go towards spirituality, they think food. And interesting enough, they don't think I should eat food to be healthy so that I can have more energy for my practice. They think I should stop eating food so I can fast, so I can brag to my friends that I've fasted for 10 days. This is what it was like back then. See? Oh, I've been without food for 8 days, man. I feel great. What's feeling got to do with it? How about intuition? That's much deeper than feeling. So you just kind of look at a person like that and watch them waste away. So if you go to the real teachings in India that were not the teachings that these spurious, materialistic, opportunist teachers brought over in the 50s and 60s, they would be telling you, like Vedavyas, the father of Vedanta, to his son, Sukadev, tell me about food, or tell me about Brahman, he says. Well, let me tell you about food first. So he teaches them about food, that you need to take it in moderation. I just chanted that, right? Satyena labhyas tapasya sa atma samyaginena. I started out with that chant that basically you realize the Atman through moderation, not through negation or fasting. You need to keep up your strength because it takes a lot of strength to realize the divine. You can pretend you've realized it. That doesn't take any strength whatsoever. So weak people are walking around saying, I'm realized, I'm enlightened, I got samadhi. They're putting it in their business brochures. I had samadhi, just in case you're interested. But if you had samadhi, you wouldn't be sitting down in front of a keyboard creating a brochure for a business. You'd be like an arhat. You'd see through everything and you say, I'm not having anything to do with Maya anymore. I renounce it, like Buddha did, like Jesus did, like Ramakrishna did, like this man did. You want away from it because it's a potential of wool over your eyes at every turn. So this is what we mean about anaprasada, basically, is that has to do with taking pure food with a pure mood, and then taking the food, the energy from food, up the spine. No, not up the physical spine with bones and nerves and all that. You take it inward, and then by your spiritual practice, like say, you know what I mean when I do this, right? The breathing that he taught, the pranayama, you go beyond just sitting like this. Once you master one posture like this, then you can breathe. And then this food energy tends to want to, how to put it, rise, you see. You feel elevated by that food energy. That is called mukhya prana. And that mukhya prana will help you get ojas. Ojas means the energy that a teacher has to be able to give these teachings. He's become the fire. You can go and warm yourself on that fire. And when you feel that heat of teaching radiating out of the authentic guru, you feel warmed inside. That is, your ignorance, the frozen ignorance that you're holding, disappears. It dissolves. And now you're in the presence of your own self. You might as well shake hands with your own self self meets self. Finally, after living decades, I met myself finally, or lifetimes. Now I can know that I am the self. Don't get put off by the word, the Buddhists do, but Buddha himself in that Dhammapada I was just telling you about said, there are two selves in everyone, the big self and the small self. It's the big self that needs to take charge. The great self, we call it. The Mahat, the great self. So you don't need to get put off by semantics or words, you just need to do the practices with food. So prasad means sanctified intake. Like if you read the Gita, the book would become prasad. It's not just food you take that's prasad, but the wisdom your mind eats is a kind of prasad. Jnana prasad. So Ana prasad and Jnana prasad. Ana means food. So you take food and you take it in and you do practices, and that converts itself into spiritual energy, like Shakti power. And other people are not doing that, so they have energy come and go. They feel strong, then they feel weak. See? They're very busy, then they're tired. They're under the control of the three gunas. That is, inertia, activity, and balance. And then back to inertia again, and energy and balance. They wake up, the waking state is activity. They go to sleep and dream, see, and that's a kind of restlessness. Their dreams are restless because they were restless when they were waking, so of course their dreams are going to be restless. Then you go into deep sleep and it's balance. So the three gunas are always playing with the human being, but they're not playing with the human mind that has taken this energy from food and purified it and taken it and placed it towards the goal of realization. I must gain enlightenment in this lifetime. I must become that arhat, or the jivan mukta, we call it in Hinduism, or the bodhisattva in Buddhism. So that's anaprasad. There's the mukhi prana, I just mentioned it. It's refined energy that you get from doing practice over pure food. Then asana and pranayama in Kundalini is very different than in Hatha Yoga. You're concentrating on just a few postures instead of a lot of them. And basically they want you to settle into one. And that will be sufficient for you to get to your mind. So you finally want to get to the mind and strip it of vrittis, you see, vibrations. Yoga, chitta vritti nirodha, father of yoga, says you want to quell the waves of the mind like Buddha did under the bo tree, and then this presence of the Lord will appear to you, might even speak to you. You can write it down later. The 6 chakras, they bring that up. I'm just going to go through them so we don't spend a lot of time on this. Ojas and Tejas come. Ojas is energy that you get from prana, you turn it into mukha prana, it turns into ojas, and it turns into tejas. And that's the aura you saw shining off of Jesus, and that Buddha's Noble Eight saw shining off of him, and that Holy Mother saw shining off of Sri Ramakrishna. It's a sheen that comes out. If you have tejas, then it's a radiation of wisdom. We can all get close to each other and feel the heat of each other's bodies if you're sensitive, but that's just the physical heat you're feeling. But if you get close to an awakened soul, you're feeling, as it were, intuiting this great wisdom that's in there, and you want to get close to it and just melt the iceberg of your ignorance in your mind. dissolve it right there on the spot. So you look for people who are illumined and you get the mantra from them. And then finally here, there's that third eye that I talked to you about, Jnana Chakshu. So just quickly through some of the main points of Kundalini Yoga, because if you weren't here in the last couple of weeks, we've done so much. This is really the final class in this series. So we're just jumping in at Kundalini here. But we went through this same process with Samkhya Yoga, with yoga, Patanjali's 8-limb yoga. And then we went through it with Vedanta, which is our particular special path, through Swami Vivekananda and Sri Ramakrishna. Then we looked at Tantra last week, and the qualifications to the Tantric aspirant. Do you remember them? First, they want you to be Daksha, intelligent. And along the way, they want you to be Brahmanishta, absolutely dedicated to the Lord, to God, and take your refuge in them, in him, her, it, Brahmanishta, and Brahmavadi. It must be your path. When I found the path and took initiation, got my mantra, it was at that time I renounced the world. But I might not have known it unless I was a monk. But the householders all renounced the world when that happened to them. And if they didn't, then it kicked back on them later, and they were having problems with the world. But basically, you extricated yourself out of believing in original sin, out of believing in evolution of the scientists, out of believing in one birth and one life only of the Christians, out of all of these misconceptions, and you put yourself in the world of the Divine Mother, and you said, I now belong to her, take me where you will. So you gave up the world a long time ago. And but Sri Ramakrishna said, do you want to go back and lick up the spit that you spat out on the sidewalk a few minutes ago? Probably don't want to do that. It's not that appetizing. So that's what it would be like to renounce the world and then say, oh, I guess I didn't renounce it, I'm going to take it on again. Because you renounced it because you knew that it wasn't real. All the quantum physicists are getting on board with this now. It's taken them 20 years since we first started talking about the world not being real. Now the quantum physicists are saying, we're beginning to think that maybe the world's not real. Go up on the internet, you can see it. They're writing books about it now. So it's really not that great a realization to know that the world's not real. Basically, that's how Buddha told us. And souls, great souls before he came to earth in the body, were telling us the same thing. Back to India's earliest times, Sri Ramchandra and before, well before Krishna. So all of this has to do with what we went through the last 5 weeks. We also looked at it really quickly, flash this chart at you, that we were going down the Vedic stream when we looked at Samkhya, Yoga, and Vedanta, right? And then we switched to the Tantric stream and took a boat down that on one class. And we found out that we were using not so much the wisdom yoga, but the devotional yoga. That we were doing our pujas, offering flowers to the Lord. We were chanting the names of the Lord. And we were doing devotional practices. We were reading the Narada Bhakti Sutras, you see. Those are loved by the bhaktas, and so forth. And we found out that this tantric stream led us to the 5 main sects of India. You're either a worshiper of Mother, like we are in the Vedanta. We're Shakta Advaita Vedantas here. That is, we worship the Mother and we worship non-duality that the Mother teaches. Or you're a Shaivite, which we'll talk about week after next in Portland. I show you that new chart and some of those teachings on Lord Shiva, whom they call Rudra in the ancient times. Terrible Rudra. Dissolves everything at the end. Naughty boy. You don't like that. But actually, if you want things, you can't dissolve things yourself, he'll come along and do it for you, then that's a good thing. Clinging to an aging body and not being able to give it up. See that? Oh, that's all right, give it to Shiva. He'll dissolve it, and he'll tell you in his special knowledge that there is no such thing as death. So he takes away your body. Death's an illusion. You don't have to worry about it. I'm just taking you out of this temporary cage of bones and flesh. If you want, you can have another. It's like a plate of cupcakes. Do you want another one? Or maybe you don't need to take another body. That's also a possibility in India. Moksha, it's called, or mukti. Freedom from all forms. Videha mukti. You don't have to take a form again. And that's a good thing, by the way. So we found out that you're either a Shakta, a Shaivite, or you're a Vaishnava. You love Vishnu and Krishna and Ram. Or you might love the elephant-headed god, Ganapacha or Ganesha. They also, a main sect in India still worships the sun, but not the sun as an orb in the sky necessarily, because there are billions of those. But the sun of wisdom, right here in the center of your forehead, they worship that sun. From there comes all wisdom, pouring down to these lower chakras. So that's the ride we took in 2 rivers over the last 5 weeks. This is the preparation that we've been reintroducing to ours, because many of us have been taking these teachings for 30 years. So maybe 30 years is enough time now that we can feel qualified and know that all of these paths are considered to be one reality. That this is the path of samanvaya, of integration, not the path of competition, not the path of separation, not the path of my God is better than your God, or my watch keeps the only right time. Intolerance isn't there. All of these paths, all of these great souls came out, corroborated each other's systems. Oh, that's great. That inspired me. I just had another idea. And they added into it. So this is what we were talking about in these 2 charts of qualification. And then we looked at qualifications in Tantra last week. There's where you need to be intelligent, you need to master your senses, you need to get some devotion to the scriptures, you need to try and crack the nut of non-duality. And people are trying to do that now with not a lot of success. What is this non-duality that puts to death all ignorance and that takes all names and forms and dissolves them into one ocean? And why is it so attracting to me that I would start to think of spending days and nights in the desert, or going into the wilderness to meditate, or sitting under a bo tree for 49 days? Why is that oneness between creature and creator, between nature and spirit, between God and mankind, why does that appeal to me so much? That's one of the qualifications you would take up as a tantric aspirant. You would sit and think about this for a long time. And you would go to a teacher and he would give you non-dual teachings. These are the mystical esoteric teachings, and they're so well explained here in Kundalini Yoga. So let's look then at, because we looked at this already, let's look then at some of the precious gifts of Kundalini Yoga. For that, let's look at this one special part of this chart. This chart, again, you've seen it several times. No need to really introduce it, except for the fact that it's got lots of arms there in the Divine Mother. And each one of them is holding a flame. Each one of those flames represents one of these great paths that we want to hear about so that we can qualify ourselves in it. And you just saw the reason why we do that, because all of these things enrich you. It might be daunting, is a good word in English, but remember, should we read it again? What Swamiji wants us to do here, because he was not a false teacher that came to us to pull the wool over our eyes. He was the real thing. Here's what he said to us. You must pay special attention to study. So set about collecting everything that the books, beginning with the Rig Veda down to the most significant insignificance of Puranas and Tantras, have got to say about creation, about annihilation of the universe, about race, about heaven and hell, about the soul, about consciousness and intellect, about the sense organs, about mukti, that's liberation, about transmigration of souls, like samsara, rebirth they call it, and such like things. No child's play here. I really want scholarly work. I am strongly of the opinion that very few of us in any yuga, in any great age, gain this knowledge. Very few of us get this. Therefore, we should go on striving and striving even unto death. That's why before you told Tantric Aspirant had that qualification, right? That I'm going to, these 7 things I'm going to attain here. And this will be the best qualification I can probably do along the Tantric river path that I can possibly acquire to make me prepared for things like mukti. Things like mukti. So, that there is a freedom from suffering. I mean, Buddha's first noble truth, there's suffering. 7th noble truth, there's a cause for it. 3rd noble truth, the cause can be ended. See, it's called the Eightfold Path. Ashtangika Marga, the Eightfold Path. And so then you have this thinking of this rebel child of India, it's called Lord Buddha, taking you past the bad news. Oh, there's suffering. We can't get past that. Pleasure turns to suffering. Suffering turns to pleasure in rounds. And we've been doing that enough, so now we want out. So that's why he says here, get a hold of books that tell you about rebirth. Have you found any in Christianity? Have you found any in Judaism? Have you found any in the Western scriptures? So-called Western, because really there's only Eastern scriptures here. There's no Western religion. There's Middle Eastern and there's Far Eastern, basically. So in these religions, you hear very little about even rebirth. So the people of today don't even know if it's true. In India, they've been thinking, I've had so many births. Krishna in the Gita says, Arjuna, you've had many births. You don't know them. I've had many births, but I know all of them. I mean, that's not mincing words there, folks. You've got the greatest, one of the greatest of all beings in the world, Sri Krishna himself, saying right there in the Gita that rebirth is true. And you're still worrying, thinking about it? Gee, maybe I had other lifetimes. So Kundalini Yoga is one of these systems that puts an end to that doubt. It comes at it from the strong standpoint that not only have you had them, but there's a way out of them. There's a way out of suffering. 2nd noble truth. And here's the path to it. Ashtangika Marga. It's 8-fold. Right thinking, right orientation, right livelihood, right this, right that. You go look at the teaching of the 4 Noble Truths. It's one of the 3 main teachings of Buddhism. And every Vedanta should be studying that because that's India. It's not a different path when you look at a Buddhist. That's your path you're looking at. And he should look at yours too. Vivekananda was, again, strongly of the opinion that there was really no essential difference between Vedanta and Buddhism. So what is all this argumentation going on? And this my watch keeps the only right time, or I have a problem with the self, the word self. Do you think Buddha was quiet? But one of the things he said in the Dhammapada is that you should master language. You should go to school and master languages. That's mother. She's in all words. You're paying attention to me if you are right now, because mother is in the words. That's her wisdom you're listening to. Because I don't speak of anything but mother. Canteen, let's see, one of Swamiji's students. When I first heard Swamiji speak, he spoke the truth. I heard him another time later, he spoke the truth again. I stayed with him the rest of my life. I heard him speak nothing but truth, you see. That's because Mother's in his words. He's her child. And he says, I open myself to all the wisdom which is yours. Pour it through me and let me speak it out to others. And so because he came to the West in 1893, we have this. Otherwise, you're trying to take a spine out of people's body and see where the chakras are hidden in there. Some surgery you have to do. Or you think, you don't know the real meaning of eating your food and what it can bring you. It's a part of the process of raising the mind's level of consciousness to the highest goal, what Buddha called paragatam, the supreme goal. Sublimation, it's called in English. The best word in English is sublimation. You want to sublimate this energy and take it deeper within you. So I'm looking here because I expect to see Swamiji's image there on that other chart. But we'll look at that hopefully in a minute. Let's go back to Tantra. Its form as Kundalini, because this grabbed our attention in the 60s. It grabbed our attention that because it was sensational, because it was mystical, because it was esoteric. Those are all dangers, really. But that's why people went to it, and went to people that were, without mentioning any names, we're looking at the naivety of the American people and saying, oh, I can make money off this, basically. And I can be great in their eyes if I pretend to know these things that they don't know, when I really don't know them because I've never experienced them myself. I'm just pretending to know them. Too late for that when the sheriff comes to town. When Vivekananda came in 1893, all of a sudden that superstition that was in the Christian religion began to go away, but the superstition that the Hindus were bringing in their religion was also on the rise, and he began to shoot that down too. It wasn't just like, oh, the Hindus are better than the Americans type of thing. It was like, both your religions have fallen. They're not giving out mother wisdom in its essence anymore, and that's not good. People are suffering because of it. You have an opportunity to actually alleviate their suffering with wisdom. It's the quickest path. Think about Krishna, you think about the God of love, right? But he says in the Gita, Nahi jnanena sadrishyam pavitramiha vidyate tat yoga svayam samsiddha kalenatmani vindate, written in letters across my mind that I'll never forget, that knowledge and wisdom is the greatest purifier of all purifiers on earth. And the wise, they'll come to realize that in due time. Tat yoga swayam samsiddha, this siddhi, this perfection. So this kind of mention of something as esoteric as Kundalini, just in the word itself, was like, what's that? I've never heard a word like that. And what's it connected to? Well, basically snakes. It's coiled up in the base of your spine, right? We were told. So you have to, entice her to uncoil. So if you go to a Kundalini teacher back then, he says, have you unwound your coil yet? I mean, have you raised the Kundalini out of the root chakra? That's called a Muladhara, by the way. And that nobody was memorizing the Sanskrit back then. Because if they did and they looked into the Sanskrit, they'd know how powerful the word Muladhara. Concentration on the root, basically, is Muladhara. But I think I'll just like imagine that there's some snake in there. See, and then maybe I can entice it up my physical spine. And like I'm like getting samadhi now, I can tell you, see. But you're getting stupid, is what you're getting when you believe those fables. You have to actually do the practice that feel the rising of Mother. And the way I was teaching it later, when I got tired of people saying, we have to raise our Kundalini because it wasn't working for them, I said, just think of Kundalini as already there in all the 6 chakras. She's already there. Does she have to awaken, or do you have to awaken? Because this is the fables we were being told. Oh, let's awaken the Kundalini in you. Well, by way of speaking, okay, you can allow it. But the real thing is that she's ever awake. She never sleeps. She's that vibrant energy that's ever awake. Causes the hands to move, causes the eyes to see, causes the lips to move and the tongue to speak. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. She's also the power in the tongue to speak, and she's also the power in the words that the tongue speaks. And the power in the words that the tongue speaks can destroy ignorance. But you have to be qualified. You have to be prepared. And this takes practice. The one thing you'll X out of the equation in the West, we don't want to practice. Well, we just want to pretend like we know. And we'll tell our friends about it. But there's no pretending the awakening of Mother Kundalini. She shines through a being like Vivekananda. There's that ojas and that tejas coming through them. There's that supreme attraction that makes you cry when you find a soul that you know loves you more than your parents ever could. Because your parents were embroiling you in more ignorance because they didn't ever hear the Dharma. But this great soul who came, who's not even a part of your so-called family, spoke a few words to you and you began crying. Or you all of a sudden had a heightened state of consciousness from the mere words that were spoken to you. And then not to act on them, see? Here in India, we call that chicken skin, brother. I mean, here in Hawaii, we call that chicken skin. You know, if you hear something that just really impresses you, then your hairs stand on the end of your arm. That's one of the signs of Kundalini awakening. Don't get me started, as they say, because we'll never get to finish these 4 points of Kundalini. So she moves to awaken Kundalini power and manifest it consciously at all levels of your being. That's called Shaktipat. I'm going to bite my tongue here and not talk about that. Shaktipat was so misused to try and attract Westerners that pretty soon somebody who didn't really have much power would touch you on the head and say, I've just given you Shaktipat. See? And you probably wouldn't want to get Shaktipat from a person like that because of that, the impurities in them, because they were pretending to be awakened, and they would transfer that pretense to you. I don't want that. I'll go to a real soul, or I'll awaken it myself, thank you very much. Picked up a hitchhiker here a couple years ago and wanted to give me Shaktipat right in the car. I said, well, what do you do for a living? I'm a lawyer. I want to get Shaktipat from a lawyer? I made him get out. Take you so far. So you want to get Shaktipat from an awakened or illumined soul who's an authentic guru, a Jnana Yoga, Jnana Wisdom guru who has practiced things like this. So this is the first aim of Kundalini Yoga, is to awaken you, as it were, to your own divinity. That's how we would say it in Vedanta. So you awaken you to your own divinity, that all of this is happening inside of you. And that's how you avoid personality worship, which gets you in trouble. And that's how you avoid these fables that come along and masquerade as philosophy, when the real philosophy should free you and awaken you. Basically, this is what Kundalini moves to do for you, if you will allow that. Secondly, offers an intense practice to effect purification, opening of channels and centers in you. This is called Nadi Yoga. It's the path of Nadi Yoga means sound yoga. So sound here means vibration. If I was just right now flapping my lips, but you couldn't hear me, say you were deaf or I was mute, then the vibration wouldn't be getting to you, to your ears, right? So you'd just be looking like that. we went to the, I was asked to speak at the memorial for Thich Nhat Hanh at a Buddhist center over here. And so the systems break down, you call that. Basically, they put up a screen for the people that came to that, and we were supposed to sit and watch it for a while. And so we had to watch this politician talk about Thich Nhat Hanh, but the sound wasn't on. So for 15 minutes, they made us sit there, watch this guy speaking with no sound. So I was thinking, should I get up and leave here? But I'm a special guest, so I should stay. But basically, that's kind of a metaphor, an analogy of how, if your ears aren't open, that's one thing. The next thing was be open your inner ear, and the next thing would be open your heart. So these nadis we're talking about here, they're channels that go to your heart. Not the anatomical, physical heart. Please, get over the body, would you? They go to the heart called the Atman in you. That's consciousness itself. You can envision the body as a network of avenues. And the doctors should know about that, you see, how energy is flowing or not flowing. Your food, when you eat your food, that also opens up or closes nadis. Time for a stint in the heart, because I didn't eat right. People are doing that all the time now. But this is a spiritual system. It happens in the mind, not in the body. The whole thing starts in the mind. And if the mind is closed down, that's why you have diseases. That's why you have illnesses. That's why you have ignorance. That's why you're suffering. That's why you do sinful activities, because the mind is closed to this light of consciousness that is her, that is Kundalini Shakti. So they want to reopen these nadis that have closed down. It's like, like Waimea here for 2 years, when the construction people were out there. You didn't even want to come to Waimea because that was going on for 2 years to stop in traffic jams. So imagine there are highways inside of you that are just jammed up with problems that that are of your own making and of the people around you. What are you going to do? Get in a bulldozer and just like plow through it, sometimes you think. So this is what Kundalini Yoga as a system of practice does for you. It opens up these nadis so you start thinking and therefore acting like your true self again. I'm trying to give some commentary on each of these points. So that's Nadi Yoga. Ara Eva Ratanabha Samhatra Yatra Nadyaha Sha Ishontas Charche Bahuda Jayamanaha Om Itjevam Jayatha Atmanam Svastivaha Paraya Tamasaha Parastat. That's a Kundalini Yoga sloka. It means Ada Eva Ratanabha. Ratanabha is a chariot. So all the nerves leading inwardly are leading to the chariot of the heart. And these are opened, you see, and then the heart opens. And you hear Om, Om Mitcheva Jayatha Atmanam. You meditate Dhyanam on Om when you open the heart. You hear this divine sound. And there are 100,000 or more of these channels leading to the heart, you see. Isn't it true in the physical body? I mean, they say take out nerves and blood vessels, tie them all together. You can stretch them across the United States. LA to New York. It's supposed to be so long. So if the physical nadis are that many in the body, then think how many nadis there are in the mind and how far they stretch. They stretch to the kingdom of heaven within you, if you want to put it in Christian terms. If you open them up, then you leave the body consciously. Isn't that what Swamiji just told us, right? You should get a hold of these books, find out everything that was written down after they heard it from God. It was written down in books like the Rig Veda, in the Tantras, in the Agamas, and find out what they say about rebirth, what they say about evolution, what they say about the dissolution of the universe. That is, when you find out with your Vedantic knowledge that you've been studying for so long, that the scientists and the biologists and the botanists and the archaeologists and the historians and all these people have been telling you lies your whole life, and your parents bought those lies, and they transferred them to you so that you're beginning to think like an imbecile. That when you put that up against the teachings of Vedanta that Vivekananda is trying to get you to awaken to, that you find out that the whole thing is an illusion. That evolution, that worlds coming and going, that people being born and dying are dreams. And that there's one consciousness that's dreaming this. See? That's why you're never born and you never died. Do you want to take my word for it? Krishna says it in the Gita. Beings are never born and they never die. He says, there is no birth for them. There's just projection of the mind and withdrawal, projection of the mind and withdrawal. I mean, right now you've entered the room and breathed in and out 80,000 times or something. By the end of the day, you've breathed in and out for 400,000 times. Tonight, you'll go to sleep and breathe in and out for 280,000 times, but you never even think of the breath. You just sit there and breathe. That's what the presence of divine wisdom is like. That's what Mother Kundalini is, flowing through all of this. And you must think about her. My teacher, Swami Sheshanandaji, you must actually think about Mother and try and find somebody who lived an exemplary life in the Mother. That would be Holy Mother herself. That's what he did. He said, I thought about her. And then I realized that moksha was true, that relativity was a dream that people were having. And reality is awakening from that dream. And there are ever awakened souls around, like Jesus and Buddha and Krishna. These are fully awakened souls that come and try and waken you up. That's what they're trying to do. They don't get anything out of it if they're authentic. So this is why these nadis are very important to Kundalini Yoga. You have to think of yourself as going in and with your own consciousness, opening them up. I'm tired of having a closed down mind. See, it's like you would get tired of having a cold. Can't breathe. I want to open up these nostrils, these passages. See? So just imagine your head has had a really bad 100 lifetime cold. See, and you're just tired of it. And so you go sit under a tree for 49 or 50 days and you try and breathe. See. Find some guru who sells a spiritual neo-synephrine and just, open them up, begin to think like your true self again. Find the best nurse. Divine Mother is the best nurse for that. Oh, you poor thing. Let's introduce you to your first real spiritual breath. Open up this nadi. What's a nadi, Mother? Never mind. You can read about that later. So important to open up the mind. So I'm referencing this all back to the mind, not the body, only because they took it as a body teaching. If they went any deeper in the body, they took it as a prana teaching, but they didn't know what prana was. Man does not live by bread alone. That's prana. Jesus knew what prana was. You can't just breathe, turn your lungs into a pair of bellows and expect to get enlightenment. Bellows never get enlightened. Neither do hot air balloons. You're letting air in and out of them all the time. Your lungs, breathing does not enlighten you. It puts you in mind of prana, and then you take that prana, you connect it to Shakti. Because she operates the prana. And with that prana, you can be as healthy as you want. But again, think about the mind's health, because if the mind's healthy, the body will follow suit. If the mind's not healthy, the body will not be healthy. It's really a very simple rule of thumb in authentic Kundalini yoga. I mean, sometimes they even sing about that. Sometimes they like to change it up from words to music. First word is Kundalini. Kula Kundalini Goma Panjaka He Redi Granti Vidarana Karaka He Mama Manasa Chanchala Bhakti Yane Gurudeva Dayakara Jina Jane Jaya Sadguru Ishvara Prabhaka He Bhavaroga Vichara Vinashaka He Manayena Rahitava Shri Charane Gurudeva Dayakara Jina Jane. The powerful spiritual force at the base of the spine awakens at thy touch, O Master. And the bondage of desire disappears when you grant detachment and discrimination. But my mind remains restless despite these blessings. O Teacher Divine, kindly shower compassion on thy humble devotee. Victory to thee, O illumined teacher, who is the leader of our souls, the one who destroys the effects of the disease of worldliness. May my mind remain steadily fixed upon thy holy feet of sanctuary. O Teacher Divine, kindly shower compassion on thy humble devotee. So it's that powerful force at the base of the spine will awaken at thy touch, O Master. So Shaktipat, powerful Kundalini force in the spine. Why wouldn't you, and then the Guru, why wouldn't you think that these were all physical? Because you never did the practice that were spiritual, that made them spiritual. So you never saw that all the worlds exist in the mind. You thought that this was the only world. And it's why you became a vertebrate animal. You selected bones and flesh, nerves, blood, and other things that are inside the body. And you forgot your spiritual body somewhere in that process. You forgot the truth of your being, your Atman. But when they came here, they didn't forget that, and they wanted to remind you of that. So this is an indication of it's called Sri Guru Stavastaki, my guru. There's this great devotee of Sri Ramakrishna wrote this song about what happened to him when he came to Sri Ramakrishna, and this wisdom opened up in him and blessed his life. And he felt her rise, or you might say felt himself, felt the presence of her at every center. All the way up till the worlds disappeared here in the third eye. No more worlds, no more people, no more individuals, no more time, no more space, no more causality, no more karma, no more birth, no more death. What was left there? Satchidananda, pure existence, pure knowledge, and pure bliss. What can we say? It's hard to describe an experience where everything goes away, but you meet yourself for the first time, and you yourself are that God that you've been seeking for all along. And that's back to this non-duality that's so precious to India. The third point here in Kundalini is that it moves to refine mukhya prana and psychic prana and bring it forth to help bring forth higher wisdom. Ojas and Tejas would be higher wisdom in this system. This is a system in India that some people have excelled at. Whether it's ancient or more recent, historically, maybe it's more recent. Somebody put it together based upon experiences they had with this raising of spiritual awareness in our minds. Because 7 chakras are also correlative with 7 worlds. Bur, Bhuvar, Swar, Mahar, Janaha, Tapahar, Brahmaloka. These are all the lokas. And those aren't in the spine. They're in the cosmic mind. So you must make your mind have acquaintance with the cosmic mind. That's actually what you're doing when these nadis are opening. They were closed and you had an individual mind, and it thought just a certain way. And maybe it was a genius, but that wasn't enough because it still believed in time, space, and causality. See? Only Einstein got beyond time and space. Newton before him and all that, they didn't get beyond time and space. They believed it to be real. But Einstein proved mathematically that time and space were not real. So that's why the quantum physicists now are waking up and thinking about what he said decades later. But it was Heisenberg. Well, that goes on into another direction, basically. But basically, Einstein himself didn't transcend causality. That takes more than a genius to do that. To get beyond cause and effect, action and reaction, you could see how a physicist in space, studying the collision of objects in space, watching light refract from one object to another and coming up with these mathematical theories about it, they couldn't consider it to be unreal and complete their task. It's the sage or the seer or the rishi or the yogi that realizes consciousness is beyond time, space, and causation. God has no karma. Put it that way if you want it simply put. God doesn't suffer cause and effect. And cause and effect gets less and less as you awaken yourself, your consciousness to these inner worlds or these chakras. Chakra, how to put that in English? A spiritual vortex. It's like a center that's just whirling with intense spirituality. Like this universe would be there in the Muladhara chakra, right? The whole universe is in the root chakra. And that's, people haven't even awakened to that. Like, for instance, that it's dreamlike or that can be transcended. That doesn't occur to them. They cling to it. But the next center up is the center of your ancestors, where they went and so forth, and the center of the gods and goddesses, where they exist, and where the great rishis do their austerities. These centers are very deep inside of the cosmic mind, and they will go there and come back from them. Krishna says that in the Gita. The path of the sun I created at the beginning of time so that they can come and go. Some will come never to go, some will go never to come back again. So he's talking about Jivan Muktas and Videha Muktas. Some will decide, I'm going back to my source, and they'll go inside to the highest center and dissolve themselves like a hailstone in the ocean into that bliss that's free of all those problems that rise in the universe, in the realms of name and form and cause and effect, free of all that. Some will decide to come back and help others. But there's a smoky path, he says. That also is for souls who come and go. And he's even talking about the injunctions of the basic scriptures in that way. They should be good moral people, and then they come and go, and I give them the fruits that they want when they come and go. But what about all those people who don't do good actions and are evil personages? He speaks about them later in the Gita as asuras. Daiva Sura Sampat Yoga, it's called in the Gita. See, the division between the divine beings and the demoniacal beings. But we have a host or a glut of the second kind here on earth today. That's what happens when you forget yourself. You begin doing things that are just unthinkable to each other. So Thich Nhat Hanh would come and spend a whole life, trying to undo that for you. All of this was about the raising of prana to mukhya prana to shakti. I mean, this is a kind of word-wild description that if you want to get to the mother and put your case before her, that I want to awaken in this lifetime, then you'll have to do that much to qualify yourself for her attention, you see. You can't stay down there in the dank darkness. Even Sri Ramakrishna said, it's an avatar, right? Even she said, I come down to this center, but I can't go any lower. So he wants you to do the work that helps you transcend attachment to the world. Influence of your ancestors, because Buddha was into that too. He said, oh, you're just worshiping your ancestors. It's not Hinduism anymore. It's not Vedanta anymore. It's ancestor worship you're into. That's only going to take you to this center, no higher. So these beings who are part of this path of smoke are not able to pierce through the granthi that keeps the heart chakra separate from the three lower chakras. So you're going to have to envision this in your meditation. Or maybe you already have, and you're fine. I'm just saying. In the Kundalini teachings, then, basically, that's why we read there that granthis are needing to be untied. Granthi means knot in Sanskrit. So there are knots in these channels, like cholesterol going, along the artery in the physical body. But there's a kind of cholesterol that collects in the spiritual, in the mind too, called ignorance, that keeps light from passing through. So you have to go and think through it. No scalpel is going to help you there. No medicine is going to help you there. No intoxicant is going to help you there. You're just anesthetizing the brain with your marijuana and your drugs. Whether they're given by the dealer or whether they're given by the doctor. See, it's not going to help you break through these knots in your mind. You have to do that with a combination of your own self-effort and her grace. So you better find her and put her on the task. Think about her all the time, as my teacher used to say. How did I find Holy Mother after I left India to come here? And he gave 50 years or so to the US. He never went back to India when he came here to bring us this wisdom. I found her through the mantra she gave me, he said. Now I want to show you her, not just in the shrine as her picture, but I want to show you her in my heart, because now she's taken up residence in my heart, and I can have communion with her when I want to. So he's like 70, 80 years standing on the podium talking like this at the Vedanta Society where I learned, and this is what he's telling us. So how important it is for us to do the self-effort that awakens us to the true meaning of prana. If you're going to get stuck in a lot of asanas and you just do a little breathing exercise, then that's a granti you're building in yourself. You can avoid that granti, but just getting into one good position, doing the breathing exercises in a Vedic or Tantric way, because they're given differently in Vedanta and in Tantra than they are, and in Kundalini than they are in Hatha Yoga, for a whole different purpose. And then, having your body, posture, and your breath under control, you can finally get to the mind. That's the culprit. Because the mind holds the ego in it, right? The mind holds this sense of separate existence in it, that I know better, and I know even better than Mother. See, it's just arrogance in people. So with humility and openness, you get a hold of this rope of the prana, and you pull yourself up by your own effort, pierce the granti between the Manipura and the Anahata, that is the third chakra at the gut, using the body reference, and then the heart chakra, see, the real heart, the Atman. There, game over. Dream is through. And you have that experience, and you qualify yourself for illumination and for liberation both. Final one here, and we'll come to the end of our class. Taken in conjunction with the Upanishads, Kundalini opens higher centers to afford samadhi. So we had Shaktipat, we had Nada Yoga or Nadi Yoga. Now they're talking about Chakra Yoga, the actual opening of centers from the inside to beyond, to transcendence. 1,000-petaled, they call it, Sahasrara. Sri Ramakrishna said, when I went into the Sahasrara, I went beyond the third eye, and I went into this center, seventh chakra, deep, deep within, and there was Kundalini Shakti conjoined with Paramashiva. That's where Shiva and Shakti meet. That's their hiding place. That's their home. That's the home of peace, they call it. So, metaphorically, you could say, well, I awakened her down at the base of my spine. She took one look at me and said, I'm out of here. And she went rushing to the Sahasrara, and I couldn't grab onto her. Sorry, as he was going to say, her shirt tails. Can't grab onto her fast enough because she wants to unite with Shiva. And nothing's going to keep her from doing that, but you may fall off that ride. But if you have qualified yourself with these teachings, you know where to find her if you lose her. You know how to call her back with the mantra. And you know that studying the words in the scriptures is not just drab or dull or lifeless, but those words are infused with her very being. So that's why we sing to Mother. Sharade, oh Sharade, Vikya Vinashane, Sharade, Brahma Sanatani Sharare Prema Swarupani Sharare Patita Pavani Sharare Karuna Rupini Sharare Namo Narayani Sharade. Narendra Shashave Narendra Palane Narendra Kridane Narendra Shikshane Narendra Yarpane Narendra Shikshave Vivekananda Te Prabhate Pranjali Vivekananda Te Prabhate Pranjali. Om Chayu Shantihi Antariksham Shantihi Prithivi Shantihi Apaho Shantihi Oshadaya Shantihi Vanashpataya Shantihi Vishvadeva Shantihi Brahma Shantihi Sharva Shantihi Shantaredi Shantarsoma Shantaredi. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. There's peace in the sky, peace on earth, peace in the waters, peace in fire. There is peace with the gods and goddesses, peace with man, woman, and child. There is peace with peace, and Brahman is that very peace. May that peace enter into us, permeate us to the very core of our being. Om, peace, peace, peace. Peace be unto us, peace be unto all mankind. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat.